Welcome along to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
This is part of our Wisdom Unveiled series, episode 13 out of 15.
Right.
And today, we're continuing our journey into Hakim Abu Qasim Ferdowsi, specifically the really profound philosophical stuff, the ethical core hidden in his work.
Yeah, moving past the surface level, the kings, the heroes, the epic tales.
And trying to get at something, much deeper.
And we're drawing on insights from conversations with Iranian philosophers, people like Dr. Ibrahim Dinani and Dr. Esmail Mansouri Larijani. Their perspectives are really guiding this.
So the mission for this deep dive really is to unpack some of those specific, deeper layers of meaning, the ethical guidance, the spiritual thoughts that these philosophers see in Ferdowsi's verses.
Exactly. It's about viewing the Shahnameh not just as this amazing epic or, history, but as a genuine source of wisdom for life.
Okay. Now, before we properly dive in, we need to include our standard disclaimer.
Always important.
Right. This deep dive is a translation and reproduction of conversations with Iranian philosophers like Dr. Ibrahim Dinani and Dr. Esmail Mansouri Larijani. Some concepts or details might not be fully conveyed in the translation process.
Yeah, nuances can get lost, so we do apologize in advance for any discrepancies you might notice.
Okay, with that said, let's start with Ferdowsi himself. How do these philosophers actually frame him? Because it's way beyond just poet, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They see him as much more. He's a sage, first off, a hakim. That means someone with deep, profound wisdom, not just clever writing.
Right, wisdom versus just intellect.
Precisely. And he's an adib, a master of language, which, that's obvious from reading him, but maybe the most striking title they use is Musla.
A social reformer.
Yes, someone whose work was actually intended to improve society, to guide it ethically.
Wow. And central to how they read him is this idea of his faith, right?
Very central. They firmly believe Ferdowsi was a complete monotheist, a true Muslim, and specifically a perfect Shia. And they argue this isn't just some biographical footnote, it permeates his poetry.
So the whole epic is grounded in the spiritual worldview. It's not just cultural.
Definitely. And they point to a really key interpretation from Qazi Nurullah Shushtari, a major Shia scholar.
Okay, what was his take?
Shushtari argued that the entire Shahnameh fundamentally points towards two things: the Mabda, the origin,
The beginning.
and the Mad, the return, the ultimate destination.
So the whole vast sweep of it is about where we come from and where we're going.
In essence, yes. And Shushtari's view is that all the stories, the kings, heroes, battles, everything, they serve as a kind of bahana.
A pretext.
Exactly, a really engaging, rich narrative framework, but its purpose is to discuss these deeper themes: ethics, virtue, kindness, devotion to God.
So the amazing stories are like the sugarcoating on the philosophical pill, or maybe a better analogy.
Perhaps. Or like a beautiful vessel carrying precious cargo. They mention Khosrow, for example. His ethical advice, even though he's this legendary, almost pre-Islamic king,
Right.
the core message is all about righteous living, aligning with God's will.
Yeah.
The story provides the context, but the ethics are the real point.
That really changes how you'd read it. Okay, so if the stories are the pretext, how does a sage like Ferdowsi actually get these deeper meanings across? It sounds like the language itself has to operate on, different levels.
It absolutely does. And this brings us to the idea that a sage's words, a hakim's words, are rarely just literal. They contain an inner meaning,
Batim.
an inner dimension.
Yes. And within that speech, you find ram symbols and Ashana signs or indicators.
So like a code hidden within the text.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
The idea is that for a true sage, their speech isn't just words, it's a reflection of their soul, their whole identity. They speak from this place of deep inner being.
Not just from the head.
Exactly. And that depth in the speaker naturally creates these multiple layers of meaning in what they say. But you can only really access those deeper layers if you approach it with your own kind of inner depth, your zarfa, they call it.
That's the key insight. If you listen superficially, you only get the surface story. To perceive the symbols, to grasp the batin, you need a corresponding depth within yourself.
It's like tuning a radio to the right frequency.
A great analogy. And it's fascinating. Ferdowsi himself seems to hint at this. He apparently referred to understanding his work on the path of rams, the path of symbol or code.
So he's actually inviting the reader to look deeper.
He is. He's signaling there's more here. And, this idea isn't unique to him. It connects to ancient traditions of interpretation like Ta'wil and what we now call hermeneutics. It's this understanding that profound texts demand deeper engagement.
Okay, let's pivot a bit to some of the core struggles Ferdowsi depicts. The philosophers seem to really emphasize this idea of a constant battle.
Yes, a really pervasive theme is the concept of feri izadi. It's often translated as divine grace or divine glory, but it really signifies being actively aided, supported, confirmed by God's help. The term da'id ilahi.
So direct divine support.
Exactly. And this support is shown as absolutely essential for winning the constant battle humanity faces. And this battle isn't just external wars.
It's internal, too.
Primarily internal, yes. It's the fight against, well, the forces of darkness personified as Kariman, who's like the equivalent of Satan or Shaitan.
Right.
But maybe even more crucially, the battle is against the nafsi amara.
The commanding self. What exactly is that?
It's that part of us, that lower self, that constantly demands gratification, pushes towards base desires, pulls us away from virtue. It's the ego running wild, essentially.
I think we all know that feeling.
Definitely. And the philosophers stress, drawing from Ferdowsi, that you can't win this fight, internal or external, just through your own willpower. You need tawakkul.
Reliance on God.
Yes. That divine support, that ferizadi, is indispensable. Self-reliance isn't enough.
This brings up that huge philosophical question, doesn't it? If God is absolute good and only creates good, where does all the bad stuff, the evil, actually come from?
Ah, yes, the problem of evil. It's central. And they tackle this using Ferdowsi's framework. The starting principle is fundamental. From absolute good, only good can logically emanate. There's this idea of syncete suitability or correspondence between the cause and effect.
Like attracts like, in a way. Pure good source, pure good result.
Something like that. So, based on their reading of Ferdowsi, the source of what we call evil or badness isn't God. It can't be.
So where does it originate?
It comes from us, from human actions, human choices that go against God's will, that deviate from the inherent goodness of creation. And what drives those actions? Often, it's that nafsi amara again.
Our commanding self leading us astray.
Exactly. The idea is our misfortunes largely stem from ourselves, from our own deviations.
And what about Ahriman in this picture? Is he some kind of equal, opposing force to God, like a cosmic dualism?
No, absolutely not. The philosophers are clear on this, based on Ferdowsi. That would compromise God's absolute unity and power. Ahriman is seen as a creature.
A created being.
Yes, a tempter, a force of deception, but not a co-equal power. His influence depends entirely on our choices, our weaknesses, our failure to control that nafs. God has no rival, no opposite.
Okay, that clarifies the cosmic picture. Let's bring it down to the practical level. Ethics, how we should act. They make a really interesting distinction about goodness, don't they?
We do. It's a key ethical point, distinguishing between Hasan Feli and Hasan Fe'ali.
Here's me.
Hasan Feli is the goodness of the action itself. The outward deed is good. Helping someone, giving charity, that's Hasan Feli. But Hasan Fe'ali is the goodness of the doer, the person acting. It's about their inner state, their intention.
Ah, so you can do a good deed, but if your intention is bad, like just for show, it lacks that inner goodness.
Precisely. The action itself is still good externally, but the why behind it matters hugely for its ultimate value. They argue the most praiseworthy person, in Ferdowsi's view, is the one who does good not just openly, but also in secret.
Why in secret?
Because it shows their goodness comes from their inner state, their connection to that divine support, their fera. It compels them to be good whether anyone is watching or not. Doing good just for fame, while the act helps, doesn't have that same deep internal root if the intention is flawed.
Makes sense. They mention a parallel in the Quran.
Yes, about the value of giving charity secretly. It emphasizes that purity of intention, the state of the soul, is really paramount.
So what's the core ethical rule or guiding principle that comes out of all this in Ferdowsi?
It's beautifully simple, yet profound. They summarize it as, incline towards goodness, do not harm anyone. This is the path to salvation.
Salvation here, Rustigard, does that mean just worldly success or something more?
Definitely something more. They clarify it points to eternal salvation, the ultimate kind, and that do not harm anyone is really broad.
Not just people.
No, it extends to animals, even the environment. It's a very holistic ethic of causing no harm, actively inclining towards good.
And it sounds like ultimately your actions are the real test.
Absolutely. There's a powerful line they highlight. The head of goodwill is your action, which is the mirror of your religion and thought.
Your deeds reflect what's truly inside.
Exactly. Words are easy, but actions show your real state, your real beliefs.
Okay, let's touch briefly on how Ferdowsi talks about God. They noted he uses two specific terms.
Yes, he often uses both Kurdigar, which means creator.
The one who made everything.
Right. And also Parvardigar, which means nourisher, sustainer, the one who nurtures.
What's the significance of using both? Why not just stick with creator?
Using both highlights a really important understanding of God's relationship with creation. It's not like God just created the world and then, stepped back.
Like a watchmaker who winds it up and leaves.
Exactly the opposite. Parvardigar emphasizes that God's involvement is continuous. It's an ongoing process of sustaining, nurturing, providing grace in ayat. We aren't just made and then left alone. God's care and attention are constant, active.
That feels like a much more intimate, present divine force. This theme of the inner state shaping our experience keeps popping up. How does Ferdowsi connect our internal world, our thoughts, feelings, to the world we actually experience?
This is maybe one of the most practical takeaways they discuss. There's a direct, profound link between the quality of your inner life, your thoughts, your assumptions, your emotional state, and how you perceive and live in the world.
So our mindset literally creates our reality, in a sense.
In a very real sense, yes. Things like negative thinking, envy, holding bad assumptions about others, Susanna, having a narrow, constricted outlook, these things create a world that feels narrow, difficult, suffocating. They call this state tangi.
A tightness, a constriction.
Exactly. And crucially, this feeling can exist no matter what your external situation is. You could be incredibly wealthy or powerful, but if your inner world is full of tanki, you'll feel trapped.
And the opposite.
The opposite is Varaki's spaciousness, openness. This comes from cultivating good thoughts, wisdom, especially what they call akle roshan, a bright, illuminated intellect and a broad, generous perspective.
And that spaciousness can exist even if things are tough externally.
That's the point. Your inner state determines the fundamental feel, the scope of your reality. They quote a verse from Ferdowsi that nails this. Do not do anything that makes the world, despite its spaciousness, narrow for you.
Wow. Don't build your own prison walls with your thoughts.
Precisely. And wisdom, that Akko Roshan is presented as the key to unlocking that inner spaciousness and virtue.
Speaking of things that constrict us, what about those internal enemies we fight? Beyond just the nafs.
They specifically focus on two, anger, kash, and shawat.
Shawat, is that just lust?
It can include lust, but they use it more broadly to mean excessive, insatiable desire or wanting. That relentless craving for more, for pleasure, for possessions, for gratification, a kind of unbridled appetite.
Okay. And these two, anger and excessive desire, are particularly bad.
Seen as very dangerous internal enemies, yes. And perhaps especially dangerous for those who have power.
Because power gives them more opportunity to act on those impulses.
Exactly. Power can amplify them.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to the kings and the Shahnameh, often serving as cautionary tales or positive examples of grappling with these very human struggles.
Right, like that story you mentioned earlier about the king and the dervish.
Yes, it illustrates it perfectly. The powerful king asks the poor dervish if he wants anything. And the dervish replies, essentially, why would I ask anything of you? I have two slaves, anger and lust, shawat, who rule over you.
Ah, so the dervish is the true master because he controls these inner forces.
While the king, despite all his outward power, is actually enslaved by them.
That's the core insight. Real kingship, real mastery isn't about ruling others. It's about ruling yourself, specifically your anger and your excessive desires. The person devoted to God aims for that inner control.
While the outwardly powerful are often prisoners of their own impulses.
Okay, another really interesting principle they brought up was about capacity, the readiness of the recipient.
Yes, this is a crucial philosophical point with very practical implications. The idea of kabiliyat, the capacity or readiness of the person you're trying to help or teach or give something to.
Meaning you have to consider if they're actually able to receive what you're offering.
Exactly. Trying to benefit someone, teach them, give them grace. If they lack the inner kabiliyat, the readiness, it's futile.
Like her.
They use the vivid analogy of trying to plant a tree in a sherezar in salty, barren ground.
Nothing will grow.
Right. The soil just doesn't have the capacity to receive the seed or the water and nurture it. The effort is wasted because the recipient isn't prepared internally.
And this doesn't just apply to teaching, but even to receiving divine grace.
Absolutely. It connects to a wider philosophical principle. Divine gifts, atayat, are received according to one's capacity by Qadra al-Kabiliyat.
So God's grace, phase, is always available.
It's constant, like sunshine or rain, always flowing from the source. But how much you receive and whether it actually benefits you depends entirely on your own inner state, your preparedness. You need, metaphorically, fertile ground or a pure gem, ready to receive and reflect the light.
They mentioned Saudi's analogy.
Yes, the rain falls equally on the beautiful garden and the salty marsh. In the garden, it brings forth flowers. In the marsh, it just sits there or maybe makes things worse. The rain is the same. The difference is the capacity of the ground.
So cultivating our own inner capacity, our kabiliyat, is essential if we want to receive goodness or wisdom or grace, whether from other people or from the divine.
You have to prepare the soil within yourself first.
It's fascinating how these deep philosophical ideas then get woven into everyday life and culture. They made a connection between Ferdowsi's ethics and the celebration of Nowruz, the Persian New Year.
Yes, it's a really nice bridge from the abstract to the concrete. Now, Ruse isn't just seen as, a one-day party. It embodies this whole philosophy of continuous ethical renewal.
Like the saying they mention.
If you are good, every day is Nowruz. It suggests Nowruz is less about a specific date and more about maintaining a state of ethical freshness and goodness all year round.
So every day can be a chance for a fresh ethical start.
Exactly. And the actual customs of Nowruz reflect these ethical values we've been discussing. Things like,
Forgiving people.
yes, forgiving others' faults is a big part, reconciling with people you might have hurt or had disagreements with, and really importantly, letting go of Suzanne.
That's the bad assumptions, the negative thinking about others.
Right. Judging people harshly without cause.
Yeah.
They see Suzanne as a kind of inner disease, something that really poisons your perception and your relationships.
Which ties right back into that idea of tangi versus faraki, how our inner state creates our world.
It does. And Nowruz encourages replacing that Suzanne with the principle of Isalat Asaha, presuming goodness in others, giving people the benefit of the doubt, assuming they mean well unless you have clear proof otherwise. It's seen as essential for creating that spacious Faraki world, both inside and out.
So we've covered a lot for Ferdowsi as a sage, the symbolic language, the inner battles with Ahriman and the Naps, where evil comes from, the ethics of intention versus action, God as creator and sustainer, how our inner state shapes our world, overcoming anger and desire, the importance of capacity, and even how ethics live on in traditions like Nowruz. After all that, what's the ultimate enduring message? What truly lasts?
Well, the philosophers really emphasize, based on Ferdowsi, the lasting value of goodness and wisdom over absolutely everything else. Wealth, power, fame, none of it compares. They reference that poignant quote about what remains etched on this ancient arch of existence.
What was it again?
Save for goodness, nothing remains for people of insight, or sometimes translated as people of generosity.
Goodness is the only thing that truly endures. A powerful thought.
Material things decay, power fades, but the impact of a good life, the light of wisdom that resonates through time.
This has been, well, a truly deep dive. It really shows how the Shahnameh, seen through the eyes of thinkers like Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani, isn't just ancient stories. It's this incredibly rich, practical source of guidance for life.
Absolutely. From understanding the layers in language to navigating those constant inner struggles and realizing the power of our own internal state, it offers a whole worldview, really.
Grounded in ethics and a deep sense of the divine.
Exactly.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, here's that final thought for you, our listener, to maybe ponder. We talked about that powerful idea.
Right.
Your inner state creates your world's feeling of constriction, tangi, or spaciousness, faraki. So maybe take a moment to think about any areas in your own life right now that feel narrow, difficult, stuck. Could it be, as Ferdowsi's philosophy suggests, that exploring your own thoughts, challenging those negative assumptions, that Suzanne, or consciously working on those inner battles with anger, kashim, or that excessive desire, shawat, could that actually be the path in creating more spaciousness, more ease for yourself?
Definitely something worth reflecting on as you go about your day.
Indeed. Thank you so much for joining us for this exploration.
Yes, thank you. This was another deep dive in our Wisdom Unveiled series.
We really hope you found some valuable insights today, and we look forward to our next deep dive together.